usually does a quick review of our stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically I work with the engineers primarily at first to put together a draft of the content. I start by piecing it together an outline. A lot of the time that's in my head, but sometimes I put that on paper as well. And as I talk to the engineers and the developers, they show me the feature and they walk me through it, and I kind of ask them things that a user will need to know in order to be successful with that feature, things like that.
Yeah.
And then once I finally have a draft together, I send that to another tech writer to review, but also back to the developers, the engineers to review to make sure that it's all technically accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And then the writer that I send it to will do a quick review for like NI style. We have our own style guide, so they'll do a review for that. They'll look for more of like the grammatical and structural things, the types of things that you probably look for when you're peer reviewing
Mm-hmm.
your classmates' stuff. And then once I get that feedback, I'll implement it. Sometimes it's minor. Sometimes I get major feedback and I need to rework the documentation altogether.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, I was really familiar with the feature and the workflow for that feature, so my first draft was in a pretty good spot, and so I did get some good feedback. But I didn't have to, redo the whole thing.
That's cool.
And so then I send it to marketing after that, and marketing usually will have their little tidbits to add in there just to make sure that the way that we're talking about a feature or a piece of the product is in line with the way that they talk about it, because marketing and the tech comm department are separate. We're not always in sync about how we're communicating our messages, even when we're talking about the same things. So it's really important for us to regularly check in with marketing to make sure that we are in sync with our communication. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and so once it gets reviewed by everybody, I'll send it to a lead writer, and the lead writer will take another pass at it, and usually look for kind of the bigger structural things, or flow and progression and things like that, and make sure that everything is pretty seamless, and then we get to integrate it into the product.
And just briefly, where is that finally released to? Is it provided online? Or?
That's a good question. So there's actually a number of different areas. Well, in this case, there were two. So there's actually in-product content, and so we have a cool feature called Guided Help. Guided Help workbooks is what we're calling them, lessons. And in those lessons, basically you pull up a lesson in the software, and it's almost like a PowerPoint. It has different slides. So we write the content on those slides, and then we pair it with an example project, so an actual software application. And so they'll go through that guided help, those slides, one by one, and read through, and maybe they'll have to accomplish a task on one of those slides. And so the task will walk them through actually doing stuff in the software. Since it's paired, it's there together. And we can even actually put buttons in our little guided help that will highlight things in the software environment, or it'll open another program for you, or things like that.
So this document, and so you're creating this guided help. That's what the documentation looks like. Is this? Yeah. So that's one of the media that we use. The other one is online as well. So we've got the one that's in the product, and that one's it's tailored a little bit differently. It's tailored because they're actually in the software, and we know that they're working alongside this specific project. But when we move it online, we
remove all of those project-specific pieces and kind of make it a little bit more generic so that it could apply to any project. And so that's really cool to be able to do. We try to single source as much as possible and then just reuse content. And I think we'll probably talk a little bit about that on one of your later questions.
Yeah.
But,
well, so that's really, it's just really interesting because when you hear documentation, you think pages,
like
manuals.
a user manual, yeah.
Yeah. But it's not the case.
Yeah, we've actually almost completely gotten rid of all of our print documentation. Really, the main department that still uses print documentation is for our hardware products. And the main reason for that is if someone's out in the field and they don't have access to the internet for whatever reason. I guess the places that don't have access to the internet are few and far between these days. But yeah, if there's something like that. But they'll need a hard copy of the manual to get things set up over there.
But otherwise, the end product that you're creating is what is interactive usually, I guess is.
Yeah. So in this case, yes. Not all of our content ends up in these interactive lessons. Most of our content ends up online for sure. But a lot of it does end up in the software as like reference materials. So like if there's a function or something that a user doesn't understand, they can. It's what we call a context help window. So we call it context help because it's in context of whatever you have selected or whatever you're hovering over. And so there will be like almost like just-in-time help for those specific functions.
Interesting.